Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Exploratorium and Made for Movies, Episode 2 today. Today we're going to talk about Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and by that I mean the prequels, not the order in which they were filmed. So we're going to talk about Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. So I'm here with Lorne Peterson. Lorne is the chief model maker for ILM, and so Lorne is an amazing guy. I'm Ron Hipschman. I work here at the Exploratorium doing all kinds of fun stuff like this. I get to do all kinds of really good stuff. And so today we're going to talk about those few movies. And Lorne has about 1 million stories, but we're going to have to get through them really quick. I may have put too many slides in, but I think you're going to want to see them all anyway. So let's hop right in here. We're going to start with episode 1. We're going to just go through the episodes. There may be some mixing up here because some places appear in more than one episode. So when we do that, we're just going to gather them all together. So all of Naboo is going to be together, for those of you who know what Naboo is. So,
I do have to say that, in the press there were lots of things about whether or not we intended to do 6 or 8 or 12 or whatever. And when we did Star Wars, we were only doing one movie, and if it wasn't successful, we weren't going to do. So, all the prequels came because of the successes, the first 3.
I wonder when did George Lucas know that he was going to do
What's
6?
that?
When did George Lucas know he was going to do 6 or 9?
I think when the buck started rolling in. Yeah. That changes things.
When you make a lot of money, it screams sequel, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It screams sequel.
So this is where you start, I think, isn't it?
This is. We threw this in here just because it shows concept art. Before we actually start building anything, and actually before putting a movie together, George Lucas sits down with the concept artist and talks about what it is he wants to do and what it's supposed to look like. Believe it or not, some of those concept paintings, not necessarily these, will be only about that big, and they'll just have so much stuff in them, and it'll suggest the way the movie's going to go. And George Lucas can go like this at each painting. And he actually had a stamp one time made up, said Fabuloso. So it was so he wouldn't have to comment on everything. He would just have a red stamp that would go Fabuloso or no Fabuloso, that kind of thing.
I think you see them in some of the makings of doing stamping things.
Yeah,
like
stamping
that.
things, yeah.
So if we zoom in on one of those concept art.
Yeah, this was for Phantom Menace, and it had he presented the problem that he wanted C-3PO under construction rather than completed. So that meant you had to be able to see through him. So it presented us with a problem of how in the world we were going to do that. And I remember thinking that in Japan there's a type of puppet called a bunraku puppet, and usually it's half scale, and the people manipulate it with rods from behind. And I thought, something like that might work. And so this was a proof of concept by Mike Lynch again to see whether or not George Lucas could go this way or that way. That was an idea.
And that sort of looks like it exactly the way it turned out.
Yeah, so we built this thing, and then behind it is, of course, the operator, and in this case he's green, so he just disappears. And that's the actual actor, Anthony Daniels, that plays C-3PO.
This is after he got his shell, looks like, though.
Yeah.
So here he is.
This is back to Mike Lynch, the guy who actually built the thing.
And this is actually a movie, so we can actually see how it actually moves. So he's still got the arms are still on rods.
Yeah. And they have bicycle brake handles to operate the hands. It actually worked pretty good.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, it really did.
I was scratching my head during watching the movie, saying, how did they do that?
Yeah. I think they fell down a couple of times, in doing it.
That's an expensive mistake.
Yeah.
Now that's Anthony Daniels.
Yeah, and he rightfully insisted that he had been C-3PO for so long that he was the person. He didn't want the technician to operate it. He wanted to do it himself.
The finishing of C-3PO.
Yeah.
So we move on to the pod race arena.
The pod race arena, and again, the concept art that is done, and it's amazing that the set actually, the miniature, the model actually comes out incredibly like the drawing.
So there's the
in this
concept
case.
art. Oh,
Yeah, these were some of the pod racers that were in the race that little Anakin had his, and they were the engines, so they had to be built. Quite large. You know, larger is better. You know, it's like for explosions, waters, action, anything like that. You get too small, and the scale of thing breaks down. The grains of sand are too big. The drops of water are too big. That kind of thing. So, bigger is always better. And then there's always the cost factor. Bigger means more cost. That kind of thing.
but it makes it easier for you to detail
Yeah.
things, I would imagine. And when you're painting and distressing
Yeah.
things, I imagine the big ones are much easier to use.
Yeah. With the different models, people have asked me how much do they cost, and of course, cost changes with time. And so what I would do is, like, you know, that one is a used Toyota, this one is a a medium priced BMW, and that one is a lower priced Ferrari kind of a thing. We don't make as many lower priced Ferraris, but we make a lot of Toyotas and BMWs.
These must have been Toyotas. Maybe BMWs.
You know, there were a lot of them. When you put them all together, they were probably in the very expensive BMW
You didn't get the
category.
fleet rate?
What's that?
You didn't get the fleet rate?
yeah. Or the lower price Ferrari.
He's really hard to find in photos, by the way. He's very humble, and I have a hard time finding photos of this guy, but we found a couple. This is this is Anakin's.
This is Anakin's pod racer. And if there's any car people here, there's a Maserati, a birdcage, and if you look at especially the front end of this and the cockpit, you go like, you're right, it is like a Maserati birdcage from the 50s. And this was the interior of the pod race arena bay, or where they would maintain the things. And there's an interesting story about this in that when George Lucas saw this, they had already shot the live action in England, and they'd built a set very similar to this. And he actually liked the miniature better. You get to have more things in instead of the giant acreage. Of course, this was like maybe 15 feet long by 8 feet wide or something like that. But we used really light silk, and stained it like canvas. And so then you have the scene here with the actual.
So they built this set real size.
They
full
built
size.
it real size, I think in Australia probably, and it looked good, but it didn't look as good as the model, and especially when you add atmosphere to the thing.
So I think here's the segment of the movie with the pod race hangar in it.
Yeah, this was so all the characters were actually added digitally, of course, but it was actually the whole full model and our pod racers that appear in it. Along with concept art, concept models are sometimes made, and this is probably about 3.5 feet wide, and it's a quickie. We call it a quickie model to see whether or not George likes it or not, whether he wants some changes or not, and from that we then go on to building the actual set. And the set was pretty big. It was maybe a third the size of this room or something like that.
I think we're going to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is we're starting to build the thing.
And it's nice because you can see the foam blocks are
they're
still filling in here.
They're very much like surfboard foam. They're fairly dense, but they are really nicely carvable. You can actually stand on them without them making footprints or anything like that. Yeah, there was somebody in the bunny suit constructing these things.
But you carved those.
Yeah, me and 2 other guys carved them. You start out with machetes, and then after you do machetes, then you work with knives and things like that to carve it.
Now you're getting some concept of the scale of that model. It's huge.
And one interesting thing about this set is you can see it's about 3 feet off the ground. And the reason is we made it so it would rotate so that you could get the right sun angle. And there's no lighting you can ever get that's better than the sun and the reflection, the bounce light. You just can't beat the sun and the quantity of sun and the cheapness of it too. It doesn't cost anything. And so we made the whole set that we could rotate, so you could say, well, we're shooting at 11 o'clock, and then we go to lunch, and you rotate the set a little bit so you get the similar angle at 1 o'clock. Sometimes it worked at first. The wheels eventually, it was too heavy. The wheels kind of gave out, so they just planned it to 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock kind of thing.
So here you can see the guy, and being 3 feet up was also an advantage because you can get the low shots in too.
Yeah. You're always trying to get down to what the human level would be in a model like that. What would be, as a kid, probably every kid has taken a picture of his model from standing like this, looking at a table, and can't understand why the model doesn't look very big. Whereas if he got down really low and shot up like at a human's eye, the model will look more real.
So this is out in the parking lot?
It's out in the, we were in San Rafael, and there was a lot of empty land around us too, even out towards the bay. Sometimes we would shoot, and Richmond and Oakland would just become a blur of gray out there somewhere, and it would just suggest that there was something out there.
So I think the next is the boom shot of this model out in the parking lot, so you can see the blue screen behind it.
Yeah. You can see something like this, how important music is to a film like this too. It's like, watch it without music and it's one thing, and you watch it with music and effects and all that kind of stuff.
Even though that wasn't the music that was behind that scene, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Because
but
we're going
it
to
works.
look at the actual scene now, so you can see that. Notice there's nothing on the sand down there. There's nothing in the background. There is a crowd in the stands, sort of. We'll get to that. Here's it.
There's floating awnings too, which they thought was an interesting idea. It's like the people that have paid more supposedly get these floating awnings above the stadium, so they're in. We make up stories like that kind of thing all over. Why is this? Why is that? And what's the reason before that? And this was people who paid.
Were those
more.
in the model? I didn't see those. Or they
Yeah,
added in later on?
They're floating canvases.
Oh, I see. Over there.
Yeah, over there too.
So the crowd.
The crowd, yeah. How we did the crowd. There's this. We used Q-tips, much like.
I want you to know we have 3 cast members
Yeah, here.
from the actual movie
Yeah.
up here. They each have their own IMDb pages.
This is the aristocrat, the policeman, and the peasant. And the colors, you may not be able to see it from there, but purple, blue, and yellow. And what it is the model shop was presented with a problem in that CG was overloaded with work, and the deadline doesn't change. And so they just had all this work to do. And they said something like, well, we have to do all these people in the stands. Is there any way the model shop could do that? And so one of the guys proposed, we do the thing with Q-tips. We have they're long Q-tips like this with wood. We have fans underneath and blowing, and we shoot at high speed, so the Q-tips scintillate a little bit. They move back and forth. And so that was our stopgap solution to it. And we made, one of the people came up with a way of doing 450,000 Q-tips and had vibrating tables with, one going down into the vats and dying and then picking up and drying and, all that kind of stuff. So you could do it within I don't remember how much time, but, I'm sure they had it done within a month, about 3 people. But in the end of the movie, before the release date, CG had more time. So they did masks that went over the top. They did the whole sequence. So somebody has said maybe 10% of it is our Q-tips and 90% of it is CG. But we were trying to save them time by producing another way of doing it, a more practical way of doing it rather than model.
And Cale Hazard, who's up in the booth right now, he actually has made a little miniature bandstand over here with some Q-tips that he dyed with. There's a fan blowing on the back. So come on up and check that out after.
Afterwards or
Yeah.
something.
Cale also did, well, when we get to Mustafar, we'll talk about the other one there too. So here's another scene from the movie. This one is showing you the compositing, and here you can actually see the Q-tips. That's a lot of Q-tips.
Yeah. Yeah, from underneath, looking underneath where the fans are.
And you put little tape flags on there too, didn't
Yeah,
you?
so some of the people were more agitated than others. They would have a little piece of tape so the fan would catch them more.
So another model that I really liked from this movie was the orbiting craft that oh, sorry,
Yeah.
spoiler alert, that Anakin goes up and blows up.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of spoiler alerts here. If you haven't seen the movies by now, I'm sorry.
Also, that's one of the guys, Tori Bellucci, I think, from MythBusters. So the guys that are MythBusters were model makers originally at ILM, and then they went on to, as we were through with the movie, they went on and started another project.
We'll see more pictures of them. So there's the model completed. Just a beautiful model.
This was in probably the inexpensive Ferrari or the very expensive BMW category.
Just beautiful. Now, they didn't actually blow up this version, did they?
They didn't. It looks like they did blow it up, but it isn't that. It isn't that.
Okay. We're going to move on. Next movie. We're making good time here.
Oh, good.
I was afraid we were going to have too many slides. So, speaking of Mythbusters.
Yeah, here the guys are again.
So there you see Adam Savage and Tori Bellucci there, back there. And there may be a couple others showing up. And this model is just also gorgeous and so detailed. It's hard to believe that you can make models this detailed and realistic. But here's like the inside of that hallway. It's just it's hard to believe that's a model.
Yeah, the actors were added to this, and I remember one of the problems with this was that if there was any dust on the mold that they vacuum formed this over with, of course they would show up. So they would spend an incredible amount of time cleaning and putting a floor sweep on the floor so no dust would rise up, and doing it later at night so no one's walking around, that kind of thing.
So a lot of these things are, you take a mold, a solid mold, and you vacuum form a piece of thin plastic on top of it.
Yeah, very much like, all the things you buy in a hardware store have little vacuum packs over them, the little
blister
plastic things that are hard to get through. It's a kind of an upgraded version of that kind of a thing, is what is vacuum forming. And a lot of products that one buys have vacuum formed parts and things like that you don't ever realize that's the way they were made, but they were. Yeah, again, the dust, everything had to be really dust-free when they shot it. Otherwise, the dust particles would look like a big thing on the ground.
Giant piece of rope.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the piece of the movie that you'll see those things, and you'll see the characters composited into those models.
They are totally obedient, taking any order without question. We modified their genetic structure to make them less.
Of course, all the clones
independent
are
than
exactly the
original
same. It's
host.
the same actor.
And who was the original host?
Duplicated
A
over and over
bounty
again.
hunter called
Notice they even got his reflection in the floor.
And where is this bounty hunter now?
Oh, we keep him here.
And some people have said, well, the actors object to acting with nothing. And someone else said, well, stage actors do that all the time until the final performance.
Unaltered.
They don't necessarily perform with all the kit and caboodle there.
Tampering with the structure to make it more docile, and no.
So all those people, the clones down there, those are all CG, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah, I think everything in that shot is CG.
So moving along to one of my favorite models in this movie is the Geonosis battle arena.
Called the Execution Arena, too. And this, again, is a maquette that we make a small version of it to see how the people's place is going to slide apart, whether or not George Lucas likes it, that kind of thing. So and here's a more complete version of that, because it was fully round, and we could slide sections out so the camera could come in from the side. And then we build it the scale that we were, probably the human beings were about 2¼ inches or something like that, and something like that. And this foam that we use is, it comes in blocks 2 foot by 4 foot by 8 foot, and it's about $750 a piece. So it took many hundreds of blocks to...
$750 a piece?
Dollars a piece,
wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of foam.
A lot of foam. And in the daytime, we would carve it, again, I said, with machetes and then knives. And then after everybody would leave, I took a sandblaster with walnut shell, ground up walnut shells in it, and I would shoot it up underneath of all these stalactite type of things, and it would deteriorate it, and so you wouldn't actually see the cuts anymore from the knives. It looked much more organic, because supposedly the Geonosians had made all this in the same way that ants build ant houses. They use spittle and dirt and spittle and dirt and build these structures. So they didn't actually, in the mind of the director, they don't actually use tools. They're like ants. They build things that way. So we couldn't have anything. We didn't want to have like handrails and door handles or any of that kind of stuff. It was all as if ants had made it.
Well, like I said, you don't even really need the steps because they fly. You don't
What's
need
that?
You don't need steps or bridges here either because they
Yeah,
fly.
they fly. That we ignored that. That was the director, by the way. I guess his first run through on seeing the set.
So there's the full circle of the set, it
Yeah.
looks like. And here it is with some.
Yeah, there were little action figures about this big that represented the dead Jedi and
Did you
monster.
guys go out? Did you actually make those action figures, or did you go out to a toy store and buy a bunch of army guys and
you know,
paint
you
them?
have the privilege of just phoning the people up and saying, you know, you make the toys, send us 500 of them or something like that, and they're glad to do it usually.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here's I did kind of a super cut of the arena. So there's a lot of inconsistency here.
And sometimes a set like this, it can be very expensive for how short, whatever short period it's used, but it's determined that it's worth it. You know, you can imagine if they tried to build this live action, it's just to be so huge. So even though it makes those figure shots very, very expensive, it's considered worthwhile in that you get so much out of it, of a model that's, you know, an eighth the size of this room.
This has very little of the set behind it, but I had to include that lightsaber duel because it was so amazing. Oh well, there we go. So
Yeah.
you brought a piece of Geonosis.
I
didn't
did.
you?
I did. You know what? We should have. You know what we should do is continue talking while I
Okay.
untie.
Okay.
Oh, actually, let's untie it afterwards.
Okay, we'll do
Because
that.
it'll take me a while.
You
to,
come on up after and see it.
Yeah. I'll have them out here if anybody wants to see them. Both Mustafar and the execution arena.
Cool. So we're going to move on from Geonosis to Utapau. I didn't know the names of any of these places, but now I'm
Yeah.
learning them.
And
I'm becoming very intimate.
You know, they become vague to me. I worked on about 60 different films since '75. So, you know, I can forget names of monsters and places and all that stuff.
Speaking of which, January, next month we're doing Star Wars 4, 5, 6, the original series, but in January we're going to have Lorne come back and we're going to do all the other stuff that he's worked on. So if you're interested in Men in Black and Poltergeist,
E.T.,
E.T.
so Mission Impossible, Pirates of the Caribbean, all those kind of films.
Yeah, we're working on a lot of slides for that one. We'll
But-
never make it through on that one.
No, but Utapau is this big excavation into the ground, almost like a cenote, sinkhole, something like that. And it's one of those things that we talked, as model makers, we talked about, like, God, it must have been really humid down at the bottom. Who would have wanted to live at the bottom, you know, hot and humid? And
High pressure too.
what's that?
High pressure.
Yeah, really high pressure down that far in the earth. And this is, again, the surfboard foam, and then we melted clay, kind of a automotive clay that they build cars with in Detroit. And we spread that on, and then we sculpt that and get the real fine little detail.
Looks like it's divided into half so you can get into
It
it.
is. It is. It was divided into half, so we could get down in there. Although they sometimes worked on it was all together. Came up from underneath, and
Now-
this is the application of the hot clay. Now, and you can even see one of the guys has a pan there. Someone would put it onto a heater for him, and then let that one, then hand him the next one that's hot.
And you can see this is not very deep at the moment, but this model wasn't actually used vertically like this either.
Yeah, because they had to get the camera in it, and if they had to drop the camera from the roof, that would have been more difficult. So they turned it on its edge, and which meant that the guy Nelson had to do a lot of the work on his belly. They had long prongs on a forklift and brought him in from the bottom to do the final detailing.
When they were talking about this on one of the makings of, there's like 2,000 little buildings around the
something
edge
like
of
that.
And how did they?
Oh, the guy that was doing the building said, "Well, how many buildings do you want?" And the person who was the head of the set said, "Well, I don't know, about 5 gallons, I guess. You know, just because they knew
casting resin.
What's that?
Of casting resin.
No, of actually little buildings that are about
okay.
like this. So and I think they used more than 5 gallons, but once they filled up a 5-gallon bucket, then they started mounting them in. And I think they could press into the foam too, which was kind of nice. You didn't have to glue them down. They had a little point on the backside, and you could slide them in.
They were skewered.
Yeah, little skewers.
So here they are, kind of.
Yeah, this was our kind of our standard camera rig, so you can see it works much better on a track and multiple angles and everything. Like, it would be impossible to have it come down.
The sinkhole itself was built at 2 different scales. We had a sinkhole that was about 6 feet in diameter and about 12 feet high.
This is John Knoll speaking, by the way, and he's the one who he and his brother came up with Photoshop.
And then we had
and
a close-up
they did
section
it.
that
He did
just
it while he was at ILM at
represents a small
nighttime
arc
at
of
home.
one wall with a lot of buildings that could be reconfigured in different ways to appear to be different parts of the city. We elected to take the model that had been built, and we photographed it for a handful of hero shots where we got a really good look at it.
He's the kind of guy who makes me realize how little I've accomplished in my life.
Well, especially he was married. At that time, he lived next door to me in a very small little house, and he was married, and he and his brother, brother probably did most of the work, but at nighttime, he's doing this, and then all of a sudden it's like it's done, and Adobe wanted to buy it. Everybody wanted to buy it from him, and he moved to a much bigger house as soon as that happened, or had a house built.
We have a lot of slides of Utapau here, so we should probably just slowly work our way through them. I mean, this is that section of the wall that he was talking about.
Again, a lot of machete work. When I was carving that, there was a guy who was hired, or one of the guys, that would sweep the floors as fast as I could carve with both hands. The floor would, get deeper and deeper, and his job was to keep the floor down so I could walk, so it wouldn't be like 8 inches, 10 inches deep or something like that. But it was constantly at it to clear the floor.
That gives you some nice perspective of the crack.
Because we would open the crack up further to get more detailed shots on the inside. And rocks scale good. When you look at a piece of shale or something like that, you could imagine it being 80 feet wide or 8 inches wide. The little details in a broken piece of rock scale good up and down. The same thing with carving rocks like this. You make them look like real rocks, and they can be whatever scale you put a doorway or a ladder or any of that kind of stuff, and it gives you an idea what the scale is, or add a human being.
So this is a nice view, sort of inside that crack with all the different buildings. And there's a nice scene in the movie that uses this when he's riding the
whatever,
that lizard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little short segment I just threw out there just to show you moving through the crack with the camera, and then they added on. I guess they composited in the actual creatures. But then there's one of the cameras. But these just gorgeous models. It's amazing the variety of them in here.
I think we were talking a little bit earlier about it, that one of the ideas was that it existed over a long period of time, so there were different styles of buildings. There was the more organic style earlier, and then the more, these are organic, it almost look like bones. So when we talk about it, we say, that this will be like an earlier stage, and they're more like bones, and then later on it's a more modern building, what we would think of a modern building style.
Here's another Mythbuster you may recognize.
Yeah.
Grande Mahara. So basically, without you, Mythbusters probably wouldn't exist. We're responsible for Mythbusters.
Well, in a way.
I want to say another thing also.
I wouldn't say in a way, but I thought it was so clever of them to do that transition. Cause
the Exploratorium has a role here, too, because Adam Savage came out to the Exploratorium and applied for a job with us before Mythbusters, and we didn't hire him.
Yeah.
So I told Adam that he'd kind of dodged a bullet with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that all of a sudden something better came along.
It looks like Grant was doing lighting here.
Grant was he was a audio engineer that worked for THX, and he really wanted to work at ILM, but he was an audio engineer, but an engineer is an engineer, and so there was a project that he said, I have a 2-week vacation. How about I come and just work for free for 2 weeks to see how I work out? And we didn't really ever hire anybody for free. It wasn't a part of the system. So we paid him, but and he worked out fine, and he knew electrical, electronics, engineering, all that kind of stuff from his studies. So, and everybody liked him, so he just continued on, and he left THX. And THX was a part of Lucasfilm, so he was within the company, and I guess we probably just paid him his regular salary. And,
Transferred him over.
Yeah.
So I like this. This is one of those older style buildings I was thinking about when we were talking about the difference in styles. There were those
Yeah.
round saucer-shaped buildings, and there was this kind of more classic, but
Yeah, more
oldish style building as well. And it appears in that crack. I have found it. There's the building in the crack right next to one of those more modern
yeah.
saucer-shaped buildings. It kind of gets blown up in the
Yeah.
third episode.
You can see how important miniature lighting is too. You know, they have to be, you can't have one kind of light so bright and another one not so bright, I mean, within a certain range. So someone has to really plan out like all the voltages and the timing on the lights and all that kind of stuff is very, very important, and how they're diffused, all that kind of stuff. And then so that they don't melt the model too. There's a balance between very bright, too hot to melt the model. And it has happened before as melted models.
I want to say next month, lighting in like the Star Destroyers is amazing. So come out and see that.
Yeah.
It's I'm just teasing you here.
Yeah, you could almost cook eggs on the little bundle of lights. It was so hot.
It must. How many months do you work on hundreds and hundreds of these models?
It does. But also on the first Star Wars, there were 7 model makers. By the time we did Sith, there was 102. So becomes, like anything, like you start to divide up the labor. It's like, you go off and do this, and 2 months you do that, and you do this, and there's a big scheduling boards as to where everybody goes to the next project and that kind of thing.
You said on the original Star Wars there were like 90 total people.
Total 90 employees, and then by the time we did Sith, there was about 2,200 employees. And 600 of those was CG. And you can see that both of us were increasing in numbers. It's just that they were increasing in numbers quicker than we were.
Actually, if you look at the Presidio buildings, which are all CG folk, it's like 5 buildings there.
The dam broke. I remember thinking at first it was all guys that would show up CG, and I thought, God, they're never going to get their genes in the gene pool because they have to work so much. They're there all the time. I thought they'll never be able to reproduce. And then given about, about 3 years, 4 years, all of a sudden women started graduating from college in computer graphics, and we started hiring women in the CG, and they said, oh, okay. Finally, this is going to, because every year we'd have a book of, marriages and babies born and that kind of thing.
I think they actually have them in the credits of the movie too. They have the births during the during the making of the movie. Yeah.
Oh, really good. Hopefully, no one died. Although it does happen.
I like the one for scale. Just these beautiful models.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can get to a piece where they actually use this. Go ahead.
I was going to add something too, that when we were both on, there were women that worked on Star Wars, but mainly in the front office. And then when we started doing clones, 6 of us moved up to Northern California to start again. And the same pattern happened. There were women receptionists and assistant to the president and accounting. And I was in the model shop. We had meetings in the model shop, and at the end of a meeting, I said, let me know if there's anything you want enough of, you had enough of, too much of, things you don't want, potential things in the future. And one of the guys, raises his hand. He says, we want more women here. There's there's only 3 women that work here, and a new receptionist has a date just like that. It's just if she's available. So I went on the lookout for a female model maker, and I'd heard that there were 1 or 2 or 3 working at an architectural company in South San Francisco. And so I just called up the company, and I faked it. And I said, could I speak to Judy, the model maker? And they said, oh, you must mean Joni, the model maker. We have no Judy. And I just lucked out that Joni and Judy were a similar name. And then when she got on the phone, I told her who I was, and I said, don't announce it to everybody, because we weren't supposed to really be robbing employees from other companies. That was one of our mandates, was not to just, scavenge people from somewhere else. But that was the dam broke then, because then she knew other women who were model makers, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, led to. And then the other departments started getting women too. And probably the first 15 years, it was still, maybe 20%, 80%. But by the time CG came along, it's pretty much 50-50 these days.
About time.
Yeah. What's that?
About time.
Yeah, about time.
So here's the scene, the Utapau, that model that was built for this.
Again, a very expensive model for only a short time.
So that's it. Here's the big model. So the small 6-foot diameter one, that's about, 5 seconds of film?
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's interesting, the CG puts in the smoke, how much that really adds to it. The atmosphere and the smoke really helps.
The beams of light.
Yeah,
and the flying creatures.
Yeah.
And then it did get reused in again, here's where we're going to go out of sequence, in Revenge of the Sith, where there's a battle at Utapau. So they got another 5 seconds out of that model. Amazing, amazing.
Yeah. Nobody was hurt in that shot either. Yeah, they were all CG guys.
Well, were they all CG?
Yeah.
So we're moving on to Mos Eisley, which was also in the
And
second
Mos
movie.
Eisley, of course, was the first used in the first film, and then George wanted to use it again. That's where Anakin, teenage Anakin and teenage Amidala meet and fly in one of their big chrome ships to this place. And again, it's really fun to do these projects, because each building may take a model maker a day, and then you hand them another drawing, and then you have a bunch of people, and we all just sit there and fake a new building it's the general theme. It's a dome, it's like archways, it's got, so you kind of get to be like a miniature architect. It's very fun to do something like that.
So things to notice here, that it only goes out like one row of buildings. One row of buildings here.
Yeah, then it extends the CG extends it. They're like, what's that called when they duplicate?
Like a matte painting?
What's that?
Like a matte
It's
painting?
not just a matte painting, but they can just take it. They take a section of here and miniature it and patch it in.
Clone?
Yeah,
It
clone.
is Attack of the Clones, though.
Yeah.
It's appropriate. Now, this is a CG-generated ship.
Yeah.
But you did build this model.
We did build a model about 6 feet, and having a model that is so reflective is really difficult. You
We'll
have
get
to.
there. We have a slide of it, actually. So let's see the CG ship come into your model.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to all the reflections. Although this CG, it does it itself. Not itself, but they have a way of doing it. But when you use it as a model, you have to make an environment around it for a reflection.
I don't have a shot of there were some elephants that you used, real elephants,
Yeah.
for these.
These creatures with the funny horns and everything like that.
The ones that kind of look like silverfish from
the
above.
first, from the first show, they were actually elephants with this costume on.
So there's the real model.
Yeah. So here we're using, of course, the sky above and the sand below. So when it's shot, you get good reflections, appropriate reflections.
But how you got that ship that silvery, to me, is amazing.
It's I'm sure at least a certain number of people know what chrome mylar is. Those balloons that kids get, that's chrome mylar, and you can get it with sticky backs. But then, of course, it won't bend over shape, so you have to mosaic it and get it on and get it perfect with no little dust particles or anything like that. And then what happens is there's a difference of coefficient of expansion between the model that's underneath, which is made out of a plastic, and the mylar at the top. They don't expand and contract in the heat and the sun the right. So it reaches a certain stage in which it starts to spread, and then you have to redo it again. You know, I'm not sure. If they left it out in the sun very long, they'd probably have to redo the chrome surface right away.
Wow. So I think we're headed towards the final battle of this movie.
Yeah, this seems a rather mundane thing that has to be done here to make a surface in which a battle happens. But then if they'd had to build a whole big set, you know, to do it, that would have been more difficult, more time consuming. And also an interesting thing is that you have to have the grain of sand of the appropriate size. There'll be sometimes when, like when they went to Yuma on Jedi, we said, well, you got to send us a bucket of the sand you use, both for the color and the size. So then we measure the size of the sand, and then the object is to find whatever scale that we're going to do the model. We need to find a material that's that much more small. And it's usually ground up walnut shells, because walnut shells come everything from about 1/8 inch little chunks to as finer than powder that you'd make bread out of. And it comes every little grain in between, so you can pick and choose the size of grain that you want. And then you mix tempera in with it in big cement mixers to make the right color.
I think we have.
So
we
if
have a
you
little
don't
bucket
do
of it here.
that, if you don't do that, and then you have a model with sand unusual, outrageously scaled, it really shows up. Yeah, that's ground up walnut shells. And walnut shells are used everything from filtration for water to sandblasting jet engines so they don't work harden the blades, to sandblasting ships so that it's totally organic, and when it just falls into the water, it just becomes just like wood chips, you know, walnut shells. It isn't damaging to the water, whereas a lot of the things they used to sandblast ships with would settle into the harbor and be pretty nasty.
So here we see the composited in vehicles and smoke over the landscape. This is on Geonosis, I think. We're back on Geonosis here.
Again, we bought pallets and pallets worth of walnut shells for, it was used in almost much of every movie we ever did.
It's also a lot lighter than sand, so I imagine.
And these are these funny shoes that he made so that he doesn't leave footprints. And he has a big duster to get rid of anything that does look like a footprint.
So there's the completed desert scene.
And even after you sculpt it, you move the stuff around and everything, then you take an air hose and you just go, and the dust of the walnut shells blows, and it just makes it perfectly natural, you know.
So I think we have a scene from the movie that used this this set with Count Dooku escaping.
Off the horn. Watch when Princess Amidala falls out of the ship too, because we'll talk about that. She falls out into the sand here. That roll was one of the people, because she's actually rolling on a green piece of fabric is probably what it is, but in the sand he had a little imprinter on a pole, and when the camera would click, you know, take a frame, he'd go click, 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 and he made the pattern down the, so it's like an equivalent of a stop motion imprint of her body as she rolls.
So the dents in the sand are stop motion.
And you can see if she rolled down some sand and it wasn't there,
I'm going to show it again.
you know, 80% of you would say, oh, there's something weird about that. You know, I know that something's wrong.
I'm sure you can go home and watch you all have Blu-rays, I'm sure.
Yeah, so she's not actually falling there. I mean, she's rolling on a piece of green fabric.
That's an amazing combination of green screen and stop motion and modeling. So, last movie. We're going to make it, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
On time?
Almost.
Whew. Wow. Now this again is an example of making a maquette. This is a case of Naboo. And the reason we did it was, of course, for money, cost-wise, you want to do as little as possible, but enough to make it. So we have the miniature camera, or the camera here, and there's a little rod and then a right angle lens. And you could run it through this thing, and somebody goes along, I see the building over on the right, could have put a blue dot on that one. Yeah, that one, and then this one, and that one. So you can tell which buildings we actually need to do the shot that we need to do. So we didn't have to do all the ones out at the side, that we would just do the ones for that particular shot. And here's where we started to build these structures, and they're pretty large. And again, it was a fun project. It was like, you know, George Lucas had gone through a stack of books about this big on Islamic architecture, Indian architecture, Egyptian architecture, Italian architecture, and he would leave a post-it on all the buildings that he liked. And so I had that as a resource, and then when people would come up and say, okay, I'm finished with my building, I need another one, I said, tell me an hour ahead of time, and I would find one and then do a quick drawing of what it was supposed to look like in 3 dimensions, and then they would grab that drawing and go off and build one, and take maybe 2 or 3 days to do it, and then be back with another one, and then we did it over and over and over again.
You actually had to sculpt all the statues too?
The statues were sculpted also too. Sculpted and molded and cast, and
Amazing.
you got to have those 102 people have to do something. And there was even a set of 2 people that they were in charge of just doing the greenery and the flowers on the rooftops and all that kind of stuff.
That's a good shot of more greenery.
Yeah, and trees also. And ivy in the foreground. And of course, where it's blue, there's going to be something added to it.
And that was the hangar that Anakin, again, spoiler alert, took off from, I believe. So
Right.
I think I have that segment here.
It's on automatic pilot.
There it is.
And the water, now a waterfall and water.
Waterfall and water.
And he has an example here. We have an example here. And well, first we'll show what it really looks like from up high.
So that's the complete model there.
Yeah, the complete model.
It's a lot of, that's a quite a large set.
Yeah, it is. And we used to, somebody said we used to do miniatures, and now we did bigatures. That from Star Wars there were miniatures, and by the time you get to Sith there are bigatures, and in this case clones too. Now, with the waterfalls, here's again a thing of CG. How much extra time is CG going to have to accomplish all these different tasks? And as the model shop is asked, can you come up with another solution? And so one of the guys came up with a thing and says, okay, what I'll do is I'll do an experiment to show them. We'll take black velvet, big giant sheets of black velvet, and we'll create these little cliffs and everything like that. And then we'll pour sugar in a tilting board that you can't see, and the sugar will come over the edge and fall down and hit these little crevices and everything and fall down and shoot at a certain speed, and that'll look like a waterfall. And they look pretty successful. Again, at the very end of the film, some of the still photographers had a chance to go up and shoot some real waterfalls up in Northern California, and the season was right. And then also CG had more time. So it became a combination of our salt waterfalls with real waterfalls and CG waterfalls.
Well, you said you started with sugar, not salt.
Oh, yes. We started with sugar, but then what happened was the next morning we didn't realize ants were everywhere, even though, so then we switched to salt. We had to clean up all the sugar, but it's like in a building, it's a big building we have like this, and you don't think of ever seeing an ant. And yet, in the morning, there were hundreds of ants all over the sugar.
I'm thinking that maybe they should have left the ants in as characters, and
Yeah,
maybe
little CG
maybe got rid of
characters.
Jar Jar.
Right. But Ron has some salt waterfalls.
I found some salt waterfall graphics. So there's 4 of them, and you can see the salt now pouring over it. It looks pretty much like water, but that's not where they end. So they take these 4 streams, they combine them into one. So now you have a flat 2D waterfall. Looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So then you have to tilt it back up. It's just a 2D thing, but if it's in a computer, you can take the top of the waterfall there and you can wrap it around an edge. So it's now going over the edge. And then you take the whiter stuff and you stick it out further. You bump map it. And then add a few more details, a couple more of them in. And you've got, add some particles, add a sky behind it. Add some particles coming over the fall, which I don't think you'll be able to see here. And you got a waterfall. But the CG started with salt.
Yeah.
So it started with real stuff, practical stuff, which I think is really cool. And that waterfall was used, I think, in a scene that was deleted.
Maybe. It certainly happens, you know, they sometimes have to cut things out of a film and.
So I thought I'd show you the deleted scene that the waterfall occurs in. So here's the deleted scene.
This is lovely.
Get this thing started.
They would be much more worried, wouldn't they?
They're Jedi. They don't worry. They know how to solve problems.
Oh, there we go, solving a problem.
There's the waterfall. Isn't that the best propeller ever?
Yeah.
There's an inconsistency here I just noticed, by the way. They're in the water there and they're soaking wet. Keep that in mind.
You know, I don't know if anybody knows it, but propellers on nuclear submarines are secret. You know, you can't take photographs of it. They spend a lot of time making sure that the Russians don't find out what our propellers look like, and they do the vice versa to make a silent propeller.
And there's the waterfall.
So in some ways, that was somebody's speculation of what the propeller would look like that would be silent and not make bubbles too. It's a propeller that doesn't make noise, doesn't make bubbles.
Okay, I want you to notice they're completely dry.
Yeah.
That's magic, Jedi magic, as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned.
Yeah, nobody shivers in movies.
I have a theory about that. If you combine Lord of the Rings and this movie, they must be elven cloaks.
Oh, yeah, right.
So there we go. Felucia.
Yeah, Felucia. There's a planet they theorized of all these giant, like not man-eating flowers, but bug-eating flowers and non-bug-eating flowers, but a very unusual-looking place.
So you had to sculpt all those plants.
Yeah, somebody sculpted them. They all had to be a little bit translucent too, just like plants are.
These are kind of stills from the movie. And I did.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't participate in this part of the film at all, and neither in the shooting nor in the making of it. So I have vague recollections of it. We first started out at maximum 90 employees, although maybe when I started there were 20 or so. By the time we finished, we had 13 different buildings. So you have that many employees, you don't even remember everybody's name, and you can, somebody could be somebody could be in the audience and say, God, I never saw Lorne Peterson. I worked there for 5 years and never saw him, or vice versa. There's so many different people, and people work on different parts of the projects in different places.
So here's the scene from Felucia, although it's a little bit gruesome. I have to warn you ahead of time. This was when Order 66 was carried out, or was it 33 or something like that? 66? Fans? So a little gruesome. But
Yeah, exactly.
they covered it over pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. Why she fell down when they shot, when you assume they didn't shoot her, I have no idea.
I think they were shooting her. They
They
were
were?
ordered to murder all the Jedi, yeah.
Oh,
You gotta watch these movies, they're really good.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
You have too close up a view.
Yeah.
Back off, man.
Well, you don't tend to see them over and over and over again. Like you did in Star Wars, everybody that I knew wanted to go with me to see Star Wars. So, you get a phone call from, like, God, I hear you worked on Star Wars. You want to go see here on Friday night? We were going to have a party, and you're the guest of honor or something. And then I said, okay, well, I guess I'll go again.
So Mustafar, I think
Yeah,
this is where we're.
this was the concept art again for Mustafar, the lava planet, and again a maquette. A guy named Danny did this maquette and painted in all this lava flowing. Again, it's for George Lucas going up or down whether or not they think this is a good idea. And here was an early experiment to see lighting from orange light from underneath and pouring this material called methacil down these little alleyways, whether or not it would look like lava. And it tilts too, so you can increase the speed of the flow of the lava.
Methacil, in case any of you want to play with it, comes as this powder material, and you mix it with hot water, and it becomes snot, basically.
Yeah.
It's also you're familiar. You've seen it many times. Any alien that drools.
Any alien that drools,
Methacil.
it's also used in a food additive. It's made up of ground bark or a D.
It's a thickener. It's
a
organic.
thickener. Yeah, it's a food industrial food thickener. Used to make ketchup thicker. It's used. It's non-toxic. It's just trees.
You've seen Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets when the Cerberus is drooling on the actors. That drool is Methacil.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think
not
also when what's that thing?
Alien
when it's
used it a
slimed,
lot.
when characters get slimed.
Oh yeah, and Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
The
Not only in
slime.
Ghostbusters, but Spunked, I think it's called. Is there a certain thing on some television show that would every once in a while
Nickelodeon,
a
yeah.
guest actor they would drop this big
Green slime.
gooey stuff on top of them?
Yeah.
That was that.
We have
stuff.
some over here, so we'll try making our own lava. You'll see how it's done here. So
A little bit of real lava.
this is real lava that I took in Hawaii. I just want you to compare what real lava looks like compared to what these guys did, and it's like amazingly similar. I mean, it's
Again, down the center is 3/4 inch thick plastic, all glued together. So that's underneath. Very very hot lights go up underneath, and when the back end can raise and lower to increase the speed, and there's pumps that put the lava up, and then off screen there's guys with big buckets of the burnt cork, and they throw that into the lava to make the crust on the top.
we'll see that. I have
And
some.
then down at the bottom, it all has to be filtered out and then pumped up to the top again.
Looks like they were bucket brigading it here.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what he's doing, but that's what it's starting to look like. And I think this particular set definitely was an expensive Ferrari, but it was used in 400 shots, I think.
Wow. Well,
Something
it was a long part of the movie.
A long part of the movie.
So they got their money's worth out of this one. It wasn't 5 seconds on the screen
Yeah.
for Utapau.
And the camera could move up, along the coast, up the lava over the top. And a CG person that was on an interview kind of thing on television, and they were talking with George Lucas and everything. And he said, well, the reason, some people would say, well, why wasn't it a CG model? Well, the CG could not they wouldn't necessarily do the backside and this side and there and over and there. And when you do a complete model, the director can say, no, now I want it to elevate and go up over the top and up that crevice and up that. And to do that in CG, they would have to create everything rather than usually they really only want to spend the time creating what's going to be seen by the camera rather than just speculating what the director might want to see later on.
So this is a little bit of video that I actually caught him. He actually does appear in a little tiny bit of video.
This again is that surfboard, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars
There he
worth of
is.
that surfboard foam.
So this is after the machete phase.
Yeah, after the machete days.
There's another piece of it. And look who we see again.
Yeah.
There's the machete phase.
With the machete. And after a while you get to know there's different kinds of machetes. There's about 4 different kinds. You use a panga, which was that big wide one for one thing, and there's one that's more long and like a sword, and you start to use one every single day, all day long, and
I
you
think you're
become
going to have a
machete expert.
speaking part here.
What's that?
You're going to have a speaking part here.
Oh.
The material itself breaks in a way like rocks do. Show what I mean. It does that kind of thing. You can take this tool, but eventually you can make it look like a
Yeah,
whole
just the
set is,
breaking and
tilted at
flicking
10
makes a very
degrees,
nice rock
and
texture.
it tilts much like a wheelbarrow, so that we can adjust the angle of it depending on how fast we want the flow.
There's the Methicil.
After doing that, you never wore the same clothes 2 days in a row because of all the little granules of foam.
And there's with the crust, with the burnt cork crust on it.
When the woman that I married when we
And there's
first
the
lived,
motion control camera.
Oh. When the woman and I first lived together, she said, "Why do you need 30 pair of jeans?" And I said, "Well, you know, I want a new pair, and I don't want to wash clothes every single day." And you know, so we finally got it retired. I got it down to like 6 or 8, 10. But
That stuff's kind of itchy, huh?
yeah, it was especially around the collar. You put a shirt on or something that you've worn before, and it's like feels bad.
I think this is another.
This is a 134th scale environment of Mustafar, and everything is looking really good.
The largest model physically on episode 3 is definitely Mustafar. The size is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 feet deep. They're all different miniatures that we use to accomplish that sort of pathway.
Do you want to be made out of chocolate or something?
Yeah. We also referred to real footage of lava and began to replicate the look of real crust.
This waterfall is flowing incredibly.
That's without the.
The lava is made up of
cork.
a number of different products, so when it flows, it looks like lava.
So, and then the scene in the movie, I took, again, a supercut, so please ignore my bad edits.
Also, Mount Vesuvius was blowing up at the time, and Italy was blowing up at the time, and so they sent a crew to shoot lava spurting in Vesuvius, and then some of it was CG and some of it was model, but they got to add some real lava spurts to it too.
Those little bloops that happen in the back.
Yeah, the little bloops are probably real. You know, we've talked about this a number of times, that people would just burn up into a crisp if you hung out near a real lava like this. You know, it wouldn't work.
They would be burning up right now.
They would be burning up.
Yeah, that little piece of lava that I took was about this wide, and I was 20 feet from it, and it was all I can bear to stand 20 feet from this little piece of lava. This is a river of lava. Be a little tougher to stand next to.
Yeah.
But he is the.
I'd always thought that this would be a perfect opportunity for a Hefty Bag commercial. You know, there's a like that, and carry Anakin away.
So he's still alive, though.
Yeah.
Not body bag time yet. So that's actually kind of the last slide of it, but I want to also mention, if you're interested in all this model making that Lorne has done, his book is an excellent source of. It's not available at the Exploratorium store, no, but
No.
you can get it. You can get it on Amazon, or
Yeah.
in your local bookstore. You can ask them to order it for you. And again, we have coming up next month, Made for Movies Star Wars 4, 5, and 6. And that will have a lot of really interesting stuff in it, some interesting outtakes from Lorne.
And there'll be pictures of me in which you won't necessarily recognize me without gray hair and all the rest, and 30 years worth of age.
40.
40.
Wow. Yeah, because didn't it just celebrate the 40th anniversary?
Yeah, 2 years ago we celebrated, had a big party for all the people that worked on the first 3 films.
Well, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, we can be happy to answer them.
The box?
Oh.